Romania, and we had the arrest and the release of Călin Georgescu, who was on his way to submit his papers for the presidential elections in Romania. The police stopped him, they detained him, they questioned him for about 6 hours. It seems like they charged him. Well, they did charge him with very vague charges, at least in my opinion, you know better, charges related to conspiracy and fascism and spreading misinformation and stuff like that. And they also went after his supporters, the police, as well. So we've covered the situation in Romania in past videos, the canceled or annulled elections that happened a few months back. We're going to have new elections in about 60 days. By the way, Georgescu has been banned from speaking to media and social media for 60 days. And we had J.D. Vance in Munich, and I think there are some connections here in Munich where he was talking about the deterioration in free speech in Europe, the deterioration of I guess you could say human rights. I guess you could say that, or at least the rise of the globalist class in Europe. And he specifically called out Romania in his speech in Munich. And I guess we got the answer from the European Union and from the Romanian authorities to J.D. Vance's speech, which is we don't give a flip what you say. We're going to do whatever we want. And right now it looks like what they want is to silence, cancel, humiliate Georgescu and his supporters. Because I do want to say one more thing. Georgescu seems, he had a knee surgery from what I understand, and he has difficulty walking. And the videos that came out where they pulled him out of the car and they put him up against the wall, I thought it was pretty shameful stuff, what they were doing to Georgescu. But your thoughts on everything that's happening in Romania?
Well, the first thing I have to say straight away is that I don't understand most of these charges. He has his views. I don't agree with all of them. I don't agree with many of them. But the point is, elections are supposed to be about people arguing about views. If his views are terrible and obnoxious, then you argue that point during an election and you try and get people to recognize that fact and to vote against him. This is a clear device. These charges seem to me so vague and so incoherent that, I mean, they are clearly political charges. I mean, I'm going to say straightforwardly, they're clearly political charges, which in my opinion are intended to prevent him running in the election. And that there is no other explanation for them other than that. And I think what has precipitated these charges is that we're now getting opinion polls in Romania, which show that if there is an election and he does run in it, he will win. It's as simple as this. So they don't want him to win. They don't want him to win because he is opposed to Project Ukraine, which is, I think, ultimately the big issue. They don't want him to win because he's critical of the EU in all sorts of ways. And the result is, and this has clearly been coordinated at multiple levels, not just within Romania, but people outside. The decision has been made, therefore, to prevent him standing. I think that is what is going to happen. I think we're going to move on beyond this. Charges have now been brought. I think we're going to see that there's going to be steps to prevent him registering, or if he does want to register, to remove his registration in order to prevent him standing and prevent him from becoming president of Romania. So once upon a time, not long ago, I can remember how people used to criticize Russia. They used to say that the Russians, that the official doctrine of the Putin government was that Russia should be a managed democracy, something which no Russian official ever said, by the way. It was a misrepresentation of what they did say, which is that it should be a sovereign democracy. In other words, an independent one. But a managed democracy, I remember reading article after article criticizing this, saying that a managed democracy is not actually a democracy. That is what Romania now is, because It is now becoming a democracy which some people are allowed to stand, but not others. I mean, in Iran, they do the same thing, and we criticize it. But apparently in Romania, it's fine. And, you bring charges against people that you disagree with and prevent them from standing. You disenfranchise a huge swathe of the Romanian electorate. You perhaps prepare the grounds for a future political crisis in Romania. And coming back to your further point, you stick up two fingers to the United States, to Donald Trump, to J.D. Vance, and to the government there, because J.D. Vance was very critical in his Munich speech about what was happening in Romania. And we see that the Romanian government, or rather whoever are the authorities in Romania, as I said, this clearly goes beyond Romania, that the authorities in Romania are just going ahead and pushing forward with this. Now, I'm not giving advice, but I would make one further point. When things like this have been done in third countries, the United States in the past has sanctioned those countries for doing those things. The United States has already said that it is critical of the way in which the Romanian election is being conducted. Will they now act? Will they now start imposing sanctions? We shall see.
I don't know about that. We'll see. We will see. But they do love them sanctions. The U.S., that's for sure. Maybe the EU will sanction Romania. I don't know. But the EU is always going on about democracy and the beauty of democracy. They have a shining example in Ukraine to go off of. That's how democracy should be run, the way it's run in Ukraine. But Georgescu was also critical of NATO.
Yeah.
He wasn't against NATO. He wasn't against NATO. He wasn't against the EU, to be fair to him. He never said, I'm going to take, at least I can't think of a time when he said, when I was listening to his speeches where he said, I'm going to take Romania out of the European Union or take Romania out of NATO. He's been critical of the conflict in Ukraine. He doesn't want the escalation. He wants more attention, more funds, more money concentrated in Romania for the people, God forbid. But there is a big NATO base. We've talked about this NATO base many, many years ago. We've discussed this NATO base in Romania about a year ago when it was being developed. It's going to be a big base, perhaps the biggest. And then we have all the weapons and the military that's in Romania, the foreign military, call them mercenaries, whatever, that are in Romania as well. And it's no secret Romania's involvement in the conflict in Ukraine. So, I mean, there is a NATO, obviously a Ukraine connection, but even above the Ukraine connection, there's a NATO connection. And of course, you could connect this to the fear that NATO has of people like Trump and Vance and the U.S.'s position towards Europe and towards NATO. So, I mean, maybe they're trying to close ranks or trying to consolidate NATO, the Europeans, and trying to make sure that no people get elected who can further jeopardize the existence of these institutions.
Well, that's exactly what it is. I mean, I think Project Ukraine is where it all began. If we go back to the election that was supposed to happen in December, and which he won, he won the first round, and then they scrapped the first round. And then they said it was all due to Russian interference, except that they never provided any evidence of Russian interference. And I mean, the famous TikTok videos were launched by a rival political party, which was using him to undermine one of its own, opponents. I mean, the whole story was, every part of what was claimed was completely untrue. And by the way, just if I can also say something about his views. As I said, I don't agree with many of his views. I mean, he said positive things about Ion Antonescu, who was Romania's leader in the 1930s and during the war. I think he was an appalling individual. I think he did terrible things. But, this is a Romanian discussion. And Georgescu has every right, it seems to me, to express whatever views he considers appropriate in that type of discussion. The point is, it was never an issue before He was actually appointed to represent Romania in all sorts of venues previously. There was never any issue about him having these views when he stood for the first round of the first presidential election, which was cancelled. These views only became